Pensacola, Florida. And I apologize, I see you're having a little problem with your earpiece there. Give you a chance to fix it while we listen to Pensacola. Rick is an independent. Go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. I was a Republican until 2006, and then after the way they mismanaged the country, I changed to that of an independent. But I do agree, I will agree with one stance the Democrats make, or some Democrats make, and that is we have to raise the cap on Social Security taxes. Now, the congressman would know. I don't know the exact number. I think it's 96,000.
106,000.
Since he makes more money than that, he probably knows what the cap is. I think they should raise it to $200,000. But the point I would like to make, I really fervently believe the only thing that's to save this country is if we have a constitutional amendment that limits terms. I think a congressman should be limited to 12 years, 6 two-year terms, 2 6-year terms for senators. We need new blood in there, and I know the West Wing answer is we do have term limits. They're called elections. Anybody who's ever studied politics knows the incumbent has an incredible advantage. So I think term limits are what we need because we need to get fresh blood. We need to get people who have built businesses, or engineers, doctors. We don't need as many lawyers as we have because all they do is transfer wealth. We need people who have built.
Let's get a response from the congressman.
Thanks, Rick. I'm not a lawyer, fortunately, for this conversation. No, I actually agree with you. I've come 180 degrees on this. I used to think that if a congressional district thought that their representative was someone they wanted to keep, they should be able to keep him or her as long as they wanted to. But because of the huge influx of money into the system and the way we've redistricted the country, particularly in the House, I think we do need term limits. I'd be for either option, going to public financing of federal campaigns, a different way to redistrict. I would do that first, but if we're not going to do that, and it doesn't look like we will, then I'd be in favor of term limits as well.
How's the job situation in Louisville today?
The which situation?
Jobs situation.
Well, we're at about a little over 10%. We've been suffering the way most communities have, but we're holding our own, and there's some bright things on the horizon. So I'm optimistic that we're coming out of the problem, but again, we're probably just a little bit behind the rest of the country on employment.
And what would make the difference in bringing more jobs to the district?
You know, I just sat in a meeting the other day, a White House Business Roundtable that was conducted in my district by the Chamber of Commerce there. It was all business leaders, and they were asked, what should we do to create jobs and stimulate the economy? And virtually, it sounded funny, it was like the Progressive Caucus, I couldn't believe it. It was all spend money on education, increase the amount of financial aid, particularly for community colleges. We need more research and development in our economy to create new categories of jobs and new industries. And we need support for things like child care and other things that will allow people to work and be productive. You know, the one thing that I keep harping on, the Republicans love to talk about lowering taxes, and as you know, in the Republican 2012 budget, they proposed to cut the maximum rate to 25% from where it is now 35%. My brother is in the barbecue restaurant business, has done very, very well, always worried about the tax rate, and he finally said to me, you know, I finally figured out that if nobody can afford barbecue, it doesn't matter what my tax rate is. And I think that's what the problem with this country is. Over the last couple decades, the percentage of the national income that has gone to the top 1% has gone from 9% to 33% or 34%. We've had the greatest concentration of wealth in this country. And we need to make sure that the 90% of the people who actually fuel the businesses in this country and who work hard make a living that enables them to aspire to a great lifestyle and to a better life. We need, again, to focus on supporting and developing our human capital, and that's going to be by the kinds of investment that I think the President's proposed, that we're committed to: infrastructure, education, and research and development.
About 3 more minutes left with Budget Committee member John Yarmuth of Kentucky, Atlanta. Jamie, independent. Go ahead, please.
Hey, I was just calling to comment on make a comment on the comment you made earlier. I was wondering, just as a member of the House, you're more directly tied to the people as far as like what their votes are going to be and like what your decisions are. You're on a pretty short leash from your constituency. And when you mentioned earlier that basically these new Republicans that have been voted into office were not representing the views of the people that were voting for them, I kind of took an issue. Can you please elaborate as to why you believe that these people that have been voted in don't represent the views of the people?
Well, no, I don't know that they don't represent the views of the people. I think most of the polls show they don't represent the views of a majority of the people. What I'm saying is they are driven by philosophy and ideology more than just a problem-solving approach. And when you're driven by, for instance, the notion that the federal government has no role in education, which is like what my senator Rand Paul believes, or in various areas that the federal government has no role, then that doesn't allow compromise to proceed in the House. That's all I was saying. Believe me, I don't question their sincerity. But again, I don't think they represent the majority views of Americans, just because, I mean, you can say, we need to cut spending, we need to cut spending. I think virtually everybody in the country will agree with that. And you poll, and people say, yes, we need to get a handle on government spending. And then you poll virtually any district. Do you want to cut Medicare to cut spending? Do you want to cut Social Security? Do you want to cut education? Do you want to cut road funds? Virtually everything that we spend money on, people say no. The only thing that they say they want to cut is foreign aid, and that's a very small part of the budget. So there is a little bit of disconnect between what reality is and what some of these political philosophies would hold, and that's where I think we're having a problem in making progress on the budget here.
Traverse City, Michigan. Dave, you're our last caller for the congressman. Go ahead, please, and a quick question, if you would.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was wondering why all the Democrats are up in arms about the $6 trillion budget that Ryan has offered. How many years do the Democrats expect to pay off this debt? I mean, if $6 trillion, we'd be at 25 years by that time. And a second note is, why don't we have the states fund the federal government and take the middleman out? Because half the money that's sent out is sent back. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, let me answer the question about the budget, because the other one is a longer philosophical question, the second one. Here's why the Ryan budget is what I call a Harry Potter budget. It's magical. It doesn't meet the sniff test of reality. First of all, it says that tax revenues are going to increase almost double over the next 10 years. The only source they can provide for that is a Heritage Foundation study, and the Heritage Foundation predicted there were going to be huge surpluses and great job growth after the Bush tax cuts. What's happened, in fact, over the last 10 years is, 10 years ago, total federal revenues were about $1.9 trillion. Today, they're $2.2 trillion. They say, even after cutting tax rates, that federal revenues in 10 years are going to be $4.3 trillion, almost double what they are now. That is impossible. They also say that unemployment's going to be 2.8%, which it has never been in the history of this country. So they've got these projections on the revenue side that make them look like they have a reasonable budget, but there's no basis for saying that could ever happen. The other thing that you have to realize is that after the next 10 years, if the Ryan budget were passed, the national debt would still increase by $8 trillion. We'd go from almost $15 trillion to $23 trillion. So he doesn't cut the deficit. He doesn't bring the budget into balance until after 2040. So again, and those are with assumptions that there's no basis in making. So that's my problem with, and I think most Democrats' problem with the Ryan budget, that it's so unrealistic. It's like he waved a magic wand and the numbers appeared.
That's Congressman John Yarmuth, a member of the Budget Committee, third term in the House of Representatives, and a busy 24 hours ahead for him, member of the Budget Committee. Thank you for being with C-SPAN today.
My pleasure, Susan. Thank you.
We're going to be here for another